Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and today I have a starter guide for the new Den of Pughlak instance in the Lord of the Rings Online. This 3-man instance was released with update 31.0.1 for Gundabad. As this is still a new series, one thing I'm interested in is doing separate videos actually on more in-depth strategies for boss fights for each difficulty tier, so please do let me know if that sounds interesting to you and you would like to see it. But back to the Den of Pughlak, this instance you can choose a solo/duo option or the full 3-man version, and it is a scaling instance available for levels 130 to 140. The 3-man version currently offers up to tier 3 difficulty if run at the level 140 cap, although, just like with Durstock, this will likely be increased to include up to tier 5 in the future. You are limited to tier 1 difficulty if you do run the solo and duo version, or if you decide to run it below the level cap. Compared to Durstock, this instance is a lot more linear and just more regularly formatted with a first boss and a final boss for a total of 2 bosses. Overall, it is a fairly fast-paced instance, but it has a lengthy final boss fight. So now let's go ahead and get into starting the instance up. Besides level and ownership of the Fate of Gundabad expansion pack, the only prerequisite you have is to complete the discovery deed on the landscape, which the entrance is located in the northeast part of the Glooming Tarn zone. The discovery is much simpler than Durstock. Just like Durstock, there is an introductory quest to complete the instance. This quest is a little bit more complicated in that it requires you to travel near the entrance of the Den of Pughlak and defeat 5 influence goblins there. The prereq for the quest appears to only be the intro quest actually in the Glooming Tarn zone, so you get it pretty early in the questing experience there. The quest tracker will actually direct you where you need to go, but for general directions you need to go to 45.9 south and 118.9 west. From the stable master and the main camp there, if you go east, there is a boat that will take you across the giant lake for ease of travel. This boat is at 47.5 south and 121.4 west. After taking the boat, you can follow the shore to the north. Alternatively, you can just swim directly towards the entrance from whichever part of the zone you would like. Either way, you should see the influence goblins nearby the entrance, and at a small inlet you need to travel just a few more steps to get to the entrance. After finally entering the instance, things will look interesting and colorful inside. It's quite the trip, really. The path as shown in the video is fairly straightforward. After the first camp of goblins, you will run into a slightly larger cavern with Ukrosh, little crab guys. These guys run very slowly and stack lots of bleeds though, so a common strategy is to just kite them. But after dealing with them, you will want to follow the flow of the water, which leads to a waterfall. This is a safe drop that will not cause falling injuries. This large room is the chamber of Kordkoth, who is the first boss, and he is quite an interesting boss. Essentially, he is a giant crab with a sword. I guess it's to stab. While mechanics aren't actually too important on tier 1 and this boss is fairly straightforward, I will point out that kiting the boss seems to be the ideal strategy. You may notice the boss occasionally gets a healing buff that looks like a green plus sign for the icon, which will heal him. The bigger challenge of this boss is with the ads. I will point out though, you only need to kill the boss for successful completion. So if, say for example, you do die when the ads come out, but you don't kill all the ads after at least killing the boss, the fight will still actually be completed and you can just loot the chest and move on. But anyway, for the actual fight, many Ukrosh ads will rush out as the boss gets low on health, and they can just be easily kited and AoE'd down. After this encounter, the cave continues in the northwest corner of the cavern, and in this room you will find deep toads, which don't do all that too much damage on their own, but they can throw you all around and have quite frequent dazes and stuns as their real challenge. Also to point out, the dazes do bypass stun immunity, which will also apply to the last boss, Pughlak. And speaking of Pughlak, to get to his actual den in the Den of Pughlak, you want to follow this room west to another waterfall, and going down that waterfall you will get to the large Pughlak den. And this is where the fun of the instance really begins. So in contrast to the purpose of this guide, I actually recommend going into the fight blind on your first attempt at a low difficulty such as like tier 1 and discovering the magic of this on your own completely fresh. So with this huge spoiler warning, I will go ahead and continue on about this wild fight even with suggesting that. So this fight has 7 total phases, a quite large and wonderful number actually. So first you fight Pughlak himself. Like the previous toads, he has a lot of dazes and stuns, which can cause issues for the person who has aggro, and during the dazes and stuns, he will go off chasing other fellowship members. Otherwise, there are occasional fear debuffs to get rid of. Now, once you get Pughlak down to low health, he sends you on a trip to a Vision of Pughlak scenario. And this is where the real part of the boss fight is, these Vision of Pughlak scenarios. There are currently 6 total scenarios, and completing each is actually a deed for the instance. These visions have a variety of tasks and challenges involving defeating enemies in a wild conception of what is usually a familiar location. After completing the vision's task, you will fight a full health Pughlak again, just like the first time. In total, you will be sent to a Vision of Pughlak 3 times. After the 3rd vision, you will enter the 7th phase and you can finally defeat Pughlak as you fight him for the 4th time, and he still fights the same as all the previous phases, at least on Tier 1 and Tier 2. After defeating Pughlak for real, you will have completed the instance and you can advance to the northwest to get your loot. So congratulations on getting through the trip, and to leave the instance you will have to right-click your portrait and select Leave Instance. Now for the starter guide, I actually do want to go into more details on the Visions of Pughlak to help you get familiar with these 6 possible scenarios. The 3 scenarios you get during the boss fight are random without any order or pattern, so I will also cover them kind of randomly here. So the first one is a quite dreamy rendition of the Water Wheel instance from Moria/Lothlorien. This one you have to follow the channels of water until you eventually reach a waterfall to the bottom floor. Once you get down this waterfall slide, you will find a cog lurker, not a bog lurker, and in my experience this is one of the easiest encounters, but he occasionally does a large hit for what is around 500,000 damage on Tier 2, and that's just for reference of time, this is around November and December 2021, and he also does summon roots which should be killed and occasionally gives debuffs which should definitely be removed if you can. The next vision is an evil Angmarum or even Mordor looking hallway. Actually, it looks more like Mordor to me. But anyway, this vision requires you to defeat multiple waves of elemental balls called candles. The possible balls are a blue one, a poison cloud, a fireball, a yellow one, and a purple fear one. These each have their own unique effect, but the toughest appear to be the yellow and fire ones. The fire one will let out a burst of damage AoE, and the yellow one will stack many deadly debuffs very quickly. While some other strategies have worked, the easiest we have found is to just kite the balls around the room and deal damage when you can. There are quite a few rounds of these enemies, so this particular vision can take a while to get through. Moving on to the next vision, it is actually perhaps even tougher than the previous one. This one is in a flooded house and is infested with roots and crawlers. Everything in here does a ton of damage and is really deadly. The mine crawlers are immune for a 30-second period of time, and to remove this immunity you must defeat the mine tangler roots. So an odd strategy that has been working and I'm guessing will be patched in the future is to just fight things from range that you can see, at least the things you can see from the first room, fight them at range as they cannot actually move into that narrow hallway. The crawlers also slow your attack speed and run speed, making the fight even more difficult when you do go into the larger room. And to advance this vision, you only have to defeat all the crawlers. I also will point out, if you take on this range strategy, you have to defeat things quite quickly, because if the crawlers are unable to attack you for too long, the whole boss fight will reset, and you definitely don't want that. So while it is quite dangerous, the safer bet can sometimes be to just run in and try to fight them normally and just hope you do not die. But anyway, we can go ahead and move on from that scary thing to the next vision, which is a little bit calmer. This one's located in a Rohan looking farmstead, actually a little bit Wildwood looking farmstead, but that's not really important. In this vision, you need to defeat 3 waves of man and cow attacks. The last wave, there will be an evil Rotalema guy that joined the fight. So the worst part of this fight are frontal AoEs and occasional knockbacks and stuns, but overall it is much easier than the previous ones in my experience. Also, the Rotalema guy will do a battered attack which can knock you way back and even knock you off the complete platform, which will knock you completely out of the fight because you cannot be in combat resed when you're falling into a void. So do be careful to have your back turned in a way where you will not get completely battered off. Also, the battered effect itself does a lot of damage if you can prepare to mitigate that as a tanker or whoever is taking the damage from him. Moving on, the second to last vision is a spectral Moomak that behaves just like the Moomak Hill spread all over Gondor. There will be ground target areas where archers fire that should be avoided. He also occasionally does a thrashing frontal AoE that is best to be avoided, and he has some stomp attacks. An additional tip I have is you can kite the Moomak if you are taking too much damage, but honestly this vision is the simplest in my experience and quite a breeze compared to many of the other ones. Now we get to move on to the last vision, and this is the only one where I'm honestly not at all familiar with the landscape in this. It appears to be a proper desert, unlike anything that I have seen in LOTRO. Perhaps this is a hint towards future content coming to the game such as Harad, but setting that aside perhaps for a later video, do let me know if you're interested. In this vision, you will find a thunderstorm. This storm is a bit deadly with strong lightning effects and occasional close-range AoE. It also summons whirlwinds that run around a bit, but people I play with and I have not found these to do all that much, if really anything, besides just be there and a little bit annoying. So while there are more thunderstorms in this vision, you only need to defeat the first one, and if you can, whoever is not tanking the thunderstorm, I highly recommend them stay far away to avoid the close range AoEs. So those are all the visions of Pughlak you can run into in the Pughlak boss fight in this instance. As far as rewards go, Tier 1 starts with a base item level of 460 and yellow quality, and gear can be disenchanted into base crafting mats. As with more recent LOTRO instances, loot is mostly fellowship tradable for an hour after acquisition. I have also gotten purple traceries and yellow enhancement runes in the instance for legendary items. And finally, I have gotten some yellow essence boxes that have dropped as well. Now in Tier 2, stepping things up, purple gear can start dropping, which disenchants into 100 embers of enchantment each, but these seem to have a low drop rate and you can still get yellow gear instead in Tier 2. Also, Tier 2 does start to contain purple item level 460 essence boxes. Just like with Durstrock in the solo/duo version, I have gotten coins of Gundabad, yellow enhancement runes, and heritage runes. If you're looking to learn the instance through gameplay, the solo version can definitely be a good way to familiarize yourself with the instance, even if the mechanics are watered down or not noticeable, and if the rewards aren't too much to write home about. But now that we have covered that, that is all I have for this guide on the Den of Pughlak instance. Again, if you have any feedback or if you have any thoughts on if you would like to see a more in-depth strategy guide once I have run Tier 2 and Tier 3 multiple times, please do comment and let me know. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something useful, please consider liking and subscribing for more or becoming a channel member to support the content. And thanks for watching, everyone.